Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Phoenix Conversation on Board Diversity. Thank you for being with us this morning. I'm Carrie Young, co-chair along with Kathleen Duffy for our Phoenix event this morning. I'm an operations expert and leader with global expertise in both military and corporate operations. I've led large organizations with financial responsibilities in excess of $800 million. My work on veterans issues received national recognition and supports the work I'm currently doing as a commissioner on the City of Phoenix Veterans Commission. I also serve as a board member and vice chair of the Better Business Bureau board serving the Pacific Southwest. Today, we'll explore the benefits that gender diversity brings to corporate boardrooms. Given the current situations with the pandemic, social unrest, and economic turmoil, our discussions today, centered on women leaders changing the world, could not be more appropriate. The goal for today's event is to raise awareness and increase the momentum of corporate leaders committing to fill more of their board seats with women directors. I'd like to thank our incredible leadership committee, comprised of Arizona's top women leaders, all dedicated to this campaign. And thank you to our panelists and director coaches for sharing their experiences with us today. Thank you to our sponsors for reinforcing their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last but not least, thanks to my co-chair, Kathleen Duffy.
Carrie, thanks so much. It's been quite a ride transitioning from a live event to an in-person event to a virtual event. But good morning, everyone. I'm Kathleen Duffy, entrepreneur and founder of Duffy Group, which is a global recruiting firm that's disrupting the industry with an innovative and cost-effective recruiting model. Carrie and I have co-chaired the Phoenix Conversation on Board Diversity for the last 2 years. And this experience has tapped two of my passions, recruiting talent and connecting people. Recruiting members of the leadership committee, the director coaches, and panelists energizes me. With 80% of board seats found through networking, connecting our attendees to top women leaders, enabling them to build and expand their professional network, and ultimately a seat on a public or private company board also energizes me. This year, several women on our leadership committee brought that same passion, and we want to recognize them for their role in finding the best talent for our event. Elise Thorpe and Jessica Estrada, Pamela Williamson, Susan Schultz, Jennifer Menino, Tony Farmer Thompson, Christine Gannon, Jen Vasson. I also want to thank my assistant, Haley Ellis, for all that she's done behind the scenes. And of course, to you too, Carrie, my co-chair. We're also fortunate to have Mally Garrow, co-founder of 2020 Women on Board, joining our event today. Mally, along with Stephanie Sonnabend, were frustrated with the slow progress being made by corporations to increase the number of women on corporate boards. So 10 years ago, they created a grassroots campaign to raise awareness of this issue and set a goal that 20% of corporate boards be comprised of women by 2020. That goal was achieved in 2019. And a few other notable and unexpected milestones along the way. In 2018, a law was passed in California requiring public companies to have at least one female director. And this mandate has inspired proposals in Massachusetts, New Jersey, Hawaii, New York, and Illinois. In 2019, Goldman Sachs announced it won't take a company public unless there is one diverse candidate with a focus on women. And of course, in 2021, that increases to 2 diverse candidates. So let's look at how Arizona is doing. If you attended the global conversation last week, you heard the speaker's optimism with the progress made across the world. And we have a lot to celebrate in Phoenix, but we also have a lot to do. So let me share the research. The percentage of women in the Russell 3000 has steadily increased in the past 4 years, going from 16% nationally to 22.6% women on the Russell 3000 boards in 2020. At the same time, the percentage of women in the Russell 3000 companies headquartered in Arizona has increased from 13.3% to 22.5% in those same 4 years of 2017 to 2020. And you can find the gender diversity of thousands of public companies on the Gender Diversity Directory at 2020wob.com. So among the 25 states in the United States that have more than 20 companies on the Russell 3000, all but 2, which are Florida and Utah, exceeded the 20% goal of women on their boards this year. And the states that achieved more than 20% for the first time are Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. There are 41 companies on the Russell 3000 headquartered in Arizona, and 25 or 61% are winning companies. We call those W companies, at 20% or greater women on their boards. With a total of 79 women on Russell 3000 company boards headquartered in Arizona. And I want to recognize 4 of the Arizona W companies on our leadership committee: Avnet, Insight, Republic Services, and GoDaddy. We also have a W company that's headquartered outside of Arizona, but has a large presence in Arizona and is a member of our leadership committee, and that's Intel. So imagine all Arizona companies on the Russell 3000 at 20% or greater. All that is needed is between 17 and 22 women, depending whether they add a seat or retire a man. And I know we have many women at this event who are qualified to join a corporate board. So today is an opportunity to meet directors who are committed to mentoring women and helping take the mystery out of this journey. But you know what? 20% is no longer good enough. And as our new campaign advocates for gender balanced boards, which is an equal number or 1 more or less women on an odd numbered board. In 2021, 20 women on boards will become 50-50 women on boards as we strive towards parity. It's a bold goal, but we've always been a bold organization. Today in Arizona, there are 3 companies out of the 41 with gender balanced boards and 163 companies nationwide, which means only 5% are gender balanced. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. And the 3 companies in Arizona are Cable One and Taylor Morrison. Both are led by women CEOs. And the third is Grand Canyon Education. So our vision is that all public company boards will be gender balanced, with women holding half of corporate board seats. And again, our new campaign name, 50-50 Women on Boards. Our new campaign will continue to educate, collaborate, and advocate for more women on boards. Our highly popular virtual Get On Board workshops will resume in February of 2021. And our new program, Path to the Boardroom for Women in their Mid-Career, will begin in Q1 of 2021. So for more information about our new programs and events and to receive the latest news and updates, make sure to visit us at 2020wob.com and continue to engage with us on social media. Last year, we built our panel by functional expertise. We had marketing, human capital, and finance and operations. This year, we recruited panelists who bring public, private, and advisory board experience and expertise, diversity at the C-level, and a CEO who walks the talk. Like the global conversation, our panel discussion will be recorded, so you will have the opportunity to watch it again. Our breakout room sessions will not be recorded. We invite you to use the Q&A option to direct questions to the panel, and please include your name and organization along with your question. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panel. Veda Manager, Leslie Dashu, Ken Lamnick, Adrienne Brown, Betsy Sanders, and our moderator, Susan Schultz. Susan, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Kathleen and Carrie, for your leadership in leading this very, very worthwhile forum. Our panelists are going to begin by sharing a few initial insights, and we'll then have a discussion among ourselves for about 15 minutes. After which we're going to respond to as many of your questions as possible. And as Kathleen asked, please do include your name and your organization so we can recognize you. And also remember, it's not in the chat, it's in the Q&A area. The panelists, after we open it up to you and have our conversation with you, the panelists will then make closing remarks, and we'll then adjourn the panel, and you will have 5 minutes to transition into the breakout rooms. I only wish we could be meeting in person. While the spotlight is on women in diversity, as Kathleen has said, we have a unique opportunity to move to parity in the boardroom. And 20 years ago, I said we might have parity by 2026. Well, I was optimistic. At the time, it seemed like a long way off, but we can do better, and we are doing better. This is really a remarkable opportunity for us. Think of, in addition to the few things Kathleen mentioned, just a few more samples of initiatives. Starbucks is now tying their compensation to increasing minority representation in its workforce to 30% at corporate and 40% of their retail employees. In addition to the women mandate, California has now passed a law requiring public companies to add minorities to their boards. And there are now 423 public companies in California that are not able to satisfy the requirement with their current boards. The dozens of firms that manage Yale University's money will now be measured on their progress in diversifying their investment staffs. And then ISS, Institutional Shareholder Services, which rates public companies' boards and thus has tremendous influence on stock price, has a baseline criteria now of 35% women and minority directors for each board. And when companies disclose, which they're required to do, they are going to penalize those whose boards do not include at least 3 women and 3 ethnically diverse directors. And finally, Karen Lynch is now CEO of CVS, which you probably know. It's the largest company by revenue yet to be run by a woman. So we are on the path to equality, and all of us in this forum today have the opportunity to make a difference. If you've not yet done so, I urge you to review the backgrounds of our extraordinary panel. It's a privilege to have you all with us. I'd like to begin with Betsy Sanders, who is an icon of women in the boardroom. At Nordstrom, she pioneered the famous service culture that became the standard. Betsy?
Well, good morning, and thank you, Susan. Yes, you can read our background, so I don't want to spend a lot of time focusing on my experience, which last night in preparation, I added up the years serving on public company boards, and I have 80. I began service in 1981, and I'd like to share with you, again, not my experience, but your opportunity as I reflect upon it. And I have to say, I'm looking straight into this camera. I'd love to be looking straight into your eyes, but I'm so grateful that all of you are here because we need you in order to improve the performance and the cultures and the companies around this country. We need you. So my first invitation to go on a board came as quite a surprise as I was considering getting an executive MBA at LMU. And it came from our banker for Nordstrom as we came to Southern California, because he had been so impressed with my business expertise, with my business intelligence, but also he was just wowed with my passion for service and my ability over the 3 years he had worked with us to move us into such an significant place in the California landscape. That was followed in 1984 by being asked to join Carl's Jr.'s board. And that came because I was in the chairs at United Way, ready to take over the chairmanship. And Carl Karcher had, again, watched me work, or I was the first woman, there were 3 women on the board, first woman chair of that United Way. And he was so impressed with what he saw that he asked me to join the board. The biggie came a few years later when H.F. Amundsen asked me to join their board, Home Savings. Again, the first woman, this time because I was in the chairs at the LA Area Chamber. So it went on and on from there. I've served in total on 11 corporate boards, in numerous public, family, and private company boards, and as you can tell, on community boards. The important thing, and I did not start my timer, so I'm talking very fast. The important thing to know is that we get an opportunity because people are looking for women. They're looking for, but that's our step in the door. That's half of the population, a little more than half the US population. What do we bring to the table that makes a difference? Because I want to tell you the best boards are matrixed. They're matrixed across gender, yes, not adequately. They're matrixed across an ethnicity, not adequately. But they're matrixed across what we bring to the table. What are our skills? What are our talents?
Thank you, Betsy.
That this is what I want you to look at. Who are you and what do you bring?
Thank you, Betsy. We're all going to participate in a conversation in just a few minutes. Now, please meet Ken Lamneck. He is a Fortune Diversity CEO, which is a great honor and most appropriate. He grew up with 7 sisters. I don't know whether this has influence on that or not, but his executive leadership team is made up of more than 50% women, which is remarkable in today's world. He's just bringing on the women president in Europe. Glenys Bryan, who is, I believe, in our audience today, was a panelist last year, and she is the EVP and CFO for Ken, and just a marvelous example of a team member for Insight. He's removed executive benefits. He has created a global Harmony Day. Insight rented a theater for Insight women to view the RBG movie, and Ken welcomed them onto the stage. So he has a wonderful history of inclusion. Ken?
Thanks so much, Susan. I
Welcome.
appreciate it. Great to be here and great to be here with everybody else and just share some viewpoints. As Susan said, yeah, I've been CEO for Insight for almost 11 years now. And it's been a great run. Of course, many of you might know the history of Tim and Eric Crown, who started the company here in Phoenix 32 years ago. And now we've been able to grow this to be a Fortune 409 company. So really excited. And a key part of our growth and success has been diversity. We've been really focused on this for quite a few years. Certainly on the gender side, we were very focused, probably really at the inception when I got here 10 years ago, to really focus on that, because we saw it as such an incredible opportunity that many companies were missing. The fact that, women, again, are more than half the population and certainly as capable and competent as any male counterparts. And many organizations still are missing that opportunity. And as we say with the war for talent, why would you ever want to exclude yourself from such a substantial part of the leadership opportunity that's out there that women really provide us? So we've been fortunate. We really focused on it early on. And what we found was the fact that when we focused on it early on, it really provided the seedlings that we needed for women to understand and see the opportunities that were there. And it really starts to take care of itself. And we don't really have to focus on it nearly as much as we used to, because again, women are in leadership positions. Everybody understands that. Everybody appreciates that. The women underneath see those opportunities. It also helps attract people from outside to say, yeah, if I'm a woman, I want to be part of that company, because they truly are diverse and understand what that really brings to the party. So that's really been helpful. As Susan mentioned, we were very fortunate that we have been on the last 2 years Fortune's list for top 100 companies for diversity. And of course, diversity is way more than even gender, right? So we're very focused on how do we become more diverse from, ethnicity, sexual orientation, race, religion, all the appropriate parts of that. Because as we all know, as we say at the company, being more diverse is just the right thing to do. And of course, it makes all the statistics show that more diverse companies are much more successful and much higher performing. So for us, it's very much a belief, as Susan said, Glenys Bryan, who is our CFO and has been for prior to me even getting here, has been a true confidant for me. There's rarely a decision I make in the company that Glenys isn't involved in. And of course, we have a president of our North America business, Joyce Mullen. She runs our largest business. As Susan mentioned, Emma D'Souza from the UK will take the reins here in a few weeks, running our European business as well. So really, really fortunate that we've got such great women leaders in the company to really take our company to new heights. And by the way, our biggest competitor is a company called CDW, and they're run by, their CEO is a woman, Chris Leahy, who's an outstanding leader and competitor of ours in our space. So when we talk about what I really see, just quickly, what I see is the opportunity for women on boards. And I do believe I'm much more optimistic going forward, because the pipeline mostly comes from the C-suite for boards. And there just hasn't been enough representation of women in the C-suite areas to really represent the opportunity for boards. I really do think that is migrating quickly. Again, as you look at the number of women we have in the C-suite, Glenys is on a few public boards. Joyce Mullen's on a public board already. So that those things will definitely start to happen, and they'll happen because the women have such great capabilities and skills. So really looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for the opportunity, Susan.
Thank you, Ken. Veda manager has been someone I've known over many years as well, and he's a special advocate for societal issues. And he gains a position on the nominating committees of the boards on which he serves in order to influence the makeup of those boards, and I commend him for that. Veda, welcome and thank you so much.
Well, great, Susan. Thanks so much for having me here today, and to the organizers and the sponsors of this great event. It's an extremely important topic today. So I'm going to be brief. My basis for being here today really can be summed up in 3 words. First, gratitude for all the individuals, including Susan and Kathleen and others who have mentored me along the way. I've been on this journey for many, many years, and to really that gave me a great amount of insight about how to navigate the boardroom and also navigate overall the business life. Secondly is allyship. Of course, I think if 2020 has taught us anything, whether we're talking about social justice, diversity, or the topic today, women on boards, allyship is an important aspect of how that gets done and how we can help each other achieve the goals that we're talking about. And thirdly is reciprocity. It would be extremely, I would say, selfish of me to hoard all the knowledge that I've accumulated over this period of time and not share it with others who aspire to boards and who seek the same opportunities and realize their full potential as I have. If you're on social media, you're probably familiar with one of the great popular memes that are going through Twitter and others right now is first how it started and how it's going. So I decided to do a little low-tech version of that today. If you can see this, this is me at age 20 on the Arizona Board of Regents, with sitting around the table with the CEOs of Arizona Public Service, SRP in the Valley, and others out there, other CEOs, the owner of the Phoenix Suns. I was 20 years old and learning really the skills and the necessary governance procedures about how to be on a board. And now some 4 decades later, how it's going. This is me on the Valvoline board, where we took an IPO in 2016. I had the opportunity as the governance and nominating chair to go create that board, put a couple of women on that board from the inception, had a third woman who ended up getting coached by the board that we were taking it public from, Ashland, and also very proud of that woman, Kathleen Wilson Thompson, because she's now on the Tesla board, as we know, it's just been taken on in the Fortune, in the S&P 500. So a really kind of great record. So I guess if you remember nothing else I say today, I really wanted to emphasize that if I at age 20 can walk into that boardroom and by the end of my term be elected as an officer of the Arizona Board of Regents at the end of that term, you with all your financial expertise, all the project management that you have, all of that experience you've accumulated are certainly ready. And our job here today is to help provide you some tips, expertise, and other things to kind of help you, and networking has been mentioned, to help you kind of get there. There's a great Harvard article. I'll give you your first tip of the day. It was published by the Harvard Business Review in January 2020. It's called, Are You Prepared for Board Service? And when I have these conversations with women, that's one of the first things that I provide to them, or anyone that's seeking a board, but particularly women, to have them read that article, because I think it provides a great foundation for the conversation today. So thank you, Susan. Look forward to the rest of the conversation and hearing my other panelists.
Thank you, Veda. Adrienne Brown has a wonderful background. She especially is experienced in managing crises generated through M&A activity. And she has special insights into advisory boards and early stage, early funded, angel funded, and VC funded companies. Adrienne, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be here, Susan, and to be a part of this panel talking about something that's near and dear to my heart. I so much appreciate 2020 Women on Board. We've done great work, and I can't wait till we get to 50. That's a great goal, and work like this is what causes movement.
Yes.
So thank you. You know, having grown up in circumstances that required me to be a brave person, whether it was in my youth stepping into unusual situations for a young Black woman, or stepping into corporate America, starting in operations on the factory floor and moving through the corporate environment. I actually remember when I first had this inkling that I wanted to be on a corporate board. And it was through developing that interest, that I started to pay attention. And it was perhaps 12 years from when I really got that urge that I wanted to join the board before the first one actually occurred, because what was most important during those corporate years was actually learning my trade of business, of operations, of being a leader in the corporate environment. And that to me really fuels how we land and find that appropriate board space that's just right for us. And fit is so important. So when I got my first board, I was so excited, and there are many reasons how that came together, which we may or may not tap into. But what was interesting is when I got that first board on Harmon's board, I thought that I was going to be on that board for 20 years. I thought that it would be, that long term, that person that's, really, bringing such value to the board over the years, because that was my image of it. And so having this amazing board that I joined, where I grew so much as a director, and then to have the strategy evolve to where we're entertaining an unsolicited offer to buy the company. It really begins to pause, because you've created this camaraderie with this group of people. And if this happens, it's going to go away. You will no longer be on this board, because this company that's acquiring you already has its board and does not plan to take you on. And so, the thing about it is you have to manage the M&A process as if you're going to get sued, because you will be. And you have to do it also. What happens if you go through this process and it doesn't happen? When I worked for Honeywell, we were being acquired by GE. That deal went all the way to the brink and did not happen. So I brought a very unique experience of actually witnessing the turmoil that it caused within the company. And therefore, it helps me as a director to know that one of the things that I must do sitting in that boardroom is to not only to think about what happens if it does, but what happens if it doesn't, and how do we manage those risks. So I feel like maybe that became one of my superpowers, because 2 additional boards that I served on, Allergan and Raytheon, both have gone through major M&A transactions. And you learn from these experiences, but it is the board coming together, really appreciating how important that confidentiality be maintained. We need to ensure that we are deliberately practicing every possible caution to ensure that we manage through this process with experts, with our legal counsel, with all the support that we get in terms of putting together a transaction that we think would represent the best interests of our share owners. And to do that, you must take care of the employees. And so that was a wonderful experience that I'm sure will continue as we go forward.
Thank you, Adrian. And just 2 things you mentioned. One is to be brave, and also the fact that you were intentional in the early days before board for women was not so well thought of, is a really important thing to think about and to emphasize. Leslie Dashew, whom I have known since she came to Arizona, which is quite a few years ago now, and followed her career. She is a renowned consultant to family-owned businesses and closely held businesses and private companies. And she is one who understands the importance of diversity, not only for gender and ethnicity, but beyond. Leslie, thank you so much. And welcome. You might want to unmute. And I wonder,
Sorry.
There you are. Good. Welcome.
So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I do represent a minority here in terms of representing the closely held and family-owned business, the private piece. And I remember when I first met Susan was at the National Association of Corporate Directors over 20 years ago. And I helped to create a program for family businesses there. And it was something that was rare at the NACD because the focus was always on public companies. And I'm here to say that if you look right now, the number of public companies is shrinking. The number of private companies, closely held companies that are recognizing the importance of good governance is increasing. So my first point is there's a lot of wonderful opportunity. Ken's very talented Vice President of Human Resources was one we just recruited onto one of the boards that I helped to convene this year, Jen. So at my work, as was mentioned, has always been with family-owned businesses, coming to it from a perspective of organizational development and as a family therapist. And as I have worked now for probably 40 years, I found that good governance is really a key piece of sustainability for family-owned businesses over multiple generations. And when you think about what good governance is, it's about effective decision making. And so often we find that the ability to access a range of points of view, objectivity, and knowledge is something that family businesses have to incorporate into their way of being, because many times they start very insular. I talk about entrepreneurial ventures are a little bit like the mitosis. Mitosis of the family business is where we develop the specialties. And one of those specialties becomes then governance and ownership. So we have 3 different roles that family businesses have to think about: the ownership role, the operating role, and the family role. And when you have the opportunity to begin to think about that, good governance and oftentimes moves from the owner, who's a patriarch, involving his attorney as a board member, perfunctory, then moves to bringing on his buddies, and then finally maybe looking at the diversity of bringing on a different generation or a different gender in the family, and ultimately to begin to professionalize the board in bringing in other points of view and looking at the matrix of what's necessary in order to build the business for the future. This year, I helped my clients to create 2 new boards of directors. We achieved 50% women participation on those boards. And how is it that happened? We brought compelling candidates like Jen. We brought compelling candidates to the client who was able to look at the women who were there, and they didn't select them because they were women. They selected them because they had really needed talents, perspectives, knowledge, experience that they wanted to incorporate into their boards of directors. And so I think the good old girl network does help to begin to make yourself known to people who are creating the boards or advising boards, as well as the people who are in closely held businesses who are getting to that point where they really need to professionalize.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. And we know the difference even a single independent director can make on a family-owned business in terms of objectivity and validation. It is such an important area to think about, and such a big opportunity and expanding opportunities you mentioned for new directors and for women. I'd like now to open up our conversation to all the panelists, and please, I urge you, audience, to submit questions under the Q&A, and we will come to those in several minutes. So let me just begin by asking, does a diverse board make a difference? And if yes, how does it make a difference? And if you can give examples, please do.
Well, why don't I begin with that, Susan? I clearly do believe that having diversity around the table has a number of different impacts. First of all, representation does matter. It certainly sends a signal and a tone from the top, as I was often reminded by one of the organizers, Chevy Humphrey, that leadership tone at the top, and as Ken and others represent here, can really make a difference in terms of how people see themselves in an organization, what they aspire to do, et cetera. Amazingly, and this is a resource that any of the attendees can get, and I'm sure my panelists have seen, the PwC Director Survey, which they survey actually board of directors every year to talk about what directors are thinking, et cetera, I was disappointed to see that only 34% of those directors that responded to the last survey indicated that diversity was important. And so that means we have a lot of work to do here with regard to understanding that this isn't just a nice to do, despite letters from BlackRock, the Goldman Sachs statistic, and urging and encouragement that was said to really show that this is a business imperative. Younger consumers are particularly looking at companies that they want to align themselves with and seeing that if those companies don't reflect our values and the leadership teams don't reflect our values, these are companies we're going to support. So I'll let my other panelists take it from there. So this isn't just something that is fluff or nice to do. There is hard evidence to show that if you're not diverse, you're not going to be prepared for the future. You're going to be irrelevant very, very quickly and find yourself on the back end of your competitors.
Yeah, thank you, Veda. I'd like to add to that I always have a customer perspective, and our customer base, no matter what business we're in, what industry, what size we are, our customer base is always diverse. And when we don't reflect the customer base, we don't understand our customer, because a board it used to be monolithic. 40 years ago, I don't need to tell you how monolithic boards were. And what happened is when diversity came in, it was very uncomfortable. Whatever we represent as diverse, very uncomfortable for the status quo. But what happened was all of our minds grew. I mentioned I was looking at getting an executive MBA. I figured the board service was an MBA. That was an MBA for me, and it was more than an MBA because I learned from each of my fellow members and they learned from me when I represent what I represent and when I respect what they do. So that sense of coming together with many minds, many points of view, many perspectives, and many skill sets is what I think diversity on the board, why the diversity on the board strengthens any organization.
And Betsy, you have an example from early days at a supermarket. Would you just quickly share that with us?
So I was the first woman on Vaughn's supermarket board. And at the time, I was the only person who hadn't participated in the leveraged buyout. So I'm looking at stock ownership, in the millions of shares, and I'm going, how do I join this board, blah, blah, blah. Well, our very first board meeting, we toured supermarkets in a developing area. And we discovered in the process of getting there that I was the only person on the board who actually had shopped in a supermarket, which I did for my large family all the time. That was my second career. And I actually became a star in my first board meeting because I could explain supermarkets from a customer perspective to this longtime board and this ownership. It was more colorful than that, but I'll stop there.
It was such a good story.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Ken, I think you have some insights and a wonderful way of thinking about how diversity kind of is self-generating and how that works.
It was interesting, of course. One of the experiences I had for diversity was I went to West Point, and in my senior year at West Point, which of course is a military school, and it was all male, and it had been all male since 1802, since it is the inception. And in the senior year, they had made the decision to allow women into the academy. And you would have thought that was the biggest revolt in the world. Here you've got all these macho people and, on and on and on. And there was a huge amount of effort our junior year to go through training to make sure the people were going to accept women into the academy. So it was quite tumultuous, as you can imagine. So I was a senior, they call a firstie. So I had responsibility for leadership roles, as they all do, for bringing women into the academy. And it was an incredible experience, right? And the diversity and the changes that brought were so incredible to the academy. And of course, everybody was at first so upset about the fact they were changing the heritage of the academy by bringing women in, but the success and the focus on that was so important. And of course, you can see that in the military today, just how important women are to that. So that was sort of one of the first really big experiences I had to see an organization that was so steeped in culture about just being so male dominated and that impact. And of course, when you bring that to our board here at Insights, we have 9 people on the board. As CEO, like all CEOs, I'm on the board, but the 8 independent directors, 3 of those people are women. So Catherine Courage is a senior executive at Google. Linda Briere is a longtime CFO in the technology industry. And Katie Bouchard, very successful career in technology and now is an executive coach. And they bring such a different sort of viewpoint to the board in diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of expertise that really makes the board a better board and makes us certainly a better company. So there's no question that, again, having that diverse point of view is so critical, to have. And I think to Betsy's point, as I totally agree with her, is the fact that we have to all look more like our customers look. And when you look at where our customer demographics are, they're all obviously incredibly diverse. So it does no company any good to just have sort of a male-dominated situation. The traditional sort of white male is not representative of what our clients look like.
Other comments on that subject? So what are the unique challenges to bring women onto public boards today? What specifically should we be doing to expedite and accelerate that?
Susan, I'll jump in on this one. I think the most important thing that is missing when we see companies that have not made this step, it is a lack of intention. It is because I think intention is what causes forward movement. And if a company is trying to figure out what to do, then they're going to first look to their nominating and governance committee and the mindset and the personality of that committee. And if you have people like Veda on your nominating and governance committee, or a chair like Veda on a nominating and governance committee, the conversations actually are more open. And so I think it allows you to have, a very direct conversation about what will be the makeup of our board, and to pick up, the conversation about customers and performance of the company. If the nominating and governance committee isn't willing to take that on and to have that deep discussion, then their intention is not to make change.
Yes.
No, I appreciate that, Adrienne. Intentionality is important. As I said earlier, I really endeavor to become chair of governance and nominating for this very reason, to be sure that our board was going to be diverse, but also to help impact what our C-suite and our practices and our board education was going to look like and the performance of the company. And there are, as many of you know, there are firms out there that specialize in diverse board searches. I'll mention Diversified Search, for example, which is a offshoot of Heidrick & Struggles, which is one of the big firms. They really have created a practice around finding diverse directors. Russell Reynolds, their co-head of board practice, is an African-American, and I work with him. I know Adrienne and others have worked with him as well. He does board searches, CEO searches, et cetera, but one of his key mandates from his customers, as well as from his perspective, is to find diverse board members. So you have to be intentional. You have to do that work to find the people out there who are willing to help source your candidates.
And you have to be proactive and not recycle the same familiar directors who are easily findable on the databases. That's the challenge. I think it would be good to share any leadership lessons that you've learned throughout the crises of this year, especially. How as directors have you addressed those, and any particular examples?
Well, I think this is where, Susan, leadership and diversity really does matter, because if you have a diverse group of people around the table, that can help you find what your differentiating factor or secret sauce is with regard to how you run your company. So I'll mention Valvoline. During the pandemic, of course, everyone was afraid and still remains circumspect about touching things, et cetera. Well, our business model at Valvoline is that you go through a bay to get your oil change, 30 minutes or less, or even less than that, but you don't have to touch anything. You don't even have to get out of your car to go to a lobby or go and touch the coffee machine or et cetera. So we get you out in and out of quick. So we began to advertise more around that. So I think, again, having people around the table that can help the company figure out what is your differentiating factor, what is that special competitive advantage you have over others out there. And we were able to stay open and also meet our goals throughout the whole pandemic and not lay anyone off during the whole period of time when our competitors suffered and other businesses had to change. So I'm sure my colleagues have other examples along that line.
You know, one of the best definitions I've ever heard of leadership is to be an unanxious presence, a calm presence in the middle of a storm. And I think that the board, and I can think of several examples of boards I work with, can help the leadership of the company to maintain that calmness. And for in two examples of boards that I work with, the boards and the leadership said, we are going to live according to the values that are foundational for these businesses. And that has to do with taking care of our employees as well as taking care of our customers. And so the notion of not laying people off, of making sure they are safe and healthy, of engaging employees in addressing the challenges of the COVID pandemic. All of these were aspects that were foundational to the companies, and the boards helped to support those decisions in staying close to the value system. And I think a lot of companies were very anxious, were reactive to the pandemic, and were not as successful. In those two companies that I'm thinking about in particular, they've ended up being more profitable and a third one that I can think of right now with the same concept has ended up being more profitable because they focused on values and staying lean and staying tight to their beliefs.
Thank you.
So I so love, I'm sorry,
Go
you
ahead.
want to stop this question, Susan?
Go ahead.
Okay, I want to I love what you said about being a not anxious presence, and I loved what Adrian said about being brave, because I would like to stress that do not even consider board membership unless you're ready to really deal with the hard issues and to take personal risk, a measured risk, but a personal risk in what you do. I needed to step in as chair of a company, of CEO for a short time, when we had to promote the founding CEO to emeritus to save the company. We did save the company, and we brought it back to a remarkable level of success, and when it was going under. But it was at significant personal cost. We got significant press, both adverse and positive, dueling papers, et cetera, et cetera. And we had to calm the fears of the people who had worked there. So that's just one example. This is an unprecedented crisis, but you will always face crises as a director of a living, breathing company.
Well said.
I'd love to just add that I have a little Arizona connection that I think is so appropriate here. I recently joined the board of Axon, and given the civil unrest that we experienced, the horrific realities that we had to face as a nation, being on the board of Axon, which is in the business of public safety and supporting policing through technology. And in the face of that crisis, I had a wonderful conversation with the CEO. It happened just as I was joining. And we talked about how this was so much in the sweet spot. Here's this pandemic crisis. Now we have this social civil unrest. really focus in on how they could take this opportunity to find solutions that would be very specifically applied to the crisis at hand. And the technology team and the marketing team went forward and in unbelievable amount of time was able to announce recently, if you go on their website, you will see the kinds of reactions that the company took. And so when I look at a pandemic or a crisis, I always think about the fact that we had those same alternatives available to us without a crisis. So as a board member, I want to always remember that we can get very comfortable with things kind of in the status quo, and it takes insight to know when to push. I know Ken, as the CEO, deals with this. How do you push the company to move faster, because it's comfortable to stay back and play in your slot? But how do you use these things? Think about just trust and working from home, how that broke so many corporate cultural norms.
Right.
We could have been taking advantage of much more flexibility, but it took a crisis. So I look at a crisis and say, what did we learn? What are we never going to give up again? Because we learned this lesson. Now let's take it forward and allow it to help us be bigger and better.
Yes. And I am afraid we need to move to the audience questions. I have many more things I'd like to talk about. There are so many examples of ways boards make a difference. So I'm going to look at some of the questions from the audience, and please, panelists, jump in. Dr. J.P. Martin with DEI Corporate Cultures would like to know, he's actually consulting with them, and he'd like to know more about a matrix set up on the board. And if I could just interject, the matrix allows you to profile the board and optimize the makeup of the board to the best interest of the company. And this is moving beyond good friends and moving beyond who you know and moving beyond the checklists. And it, to me, is the most powerful and important way to build a board. Would you all jump in? And I know, Betsy, you mentioned early days of matrixing.
Well, initially we matrixed instinctively when we realized that bringing someone as diverse as I was, in not just in gender, onto a board, we started valuing, and not just from me, but I mean, I was just one of the keys. And what we started looking at are, first of all, what are the major responsibilities of the board? And who do we have who's expert in finance, who's expert in governance, who's expert in employee and customer relations, compensation, et cetera, et cetera. And then we looked more deeply at what, for instance, where we had marketing skills, where we had strategic planning skills, et cetera, et cetera. And we created matrices to see how well we were covering those areas, including gender and ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important part of the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we worked better with recruiters. We knew what we were looking for, and it didn't closely define a person. It fully defined people. We were looking for full people.
Yeah, it forces you to look forward and think about what's necessary in the future.
Going forward,
Instead
exactly.
of backward.
And I think
Yes.
your point, Susan, I'd like to emphasize, what I found is it moves the conversation from who to what.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I find so often that as soon as we work on creating a board with independent members on family boards, they immediately instinctively start going to, oh, I know somebody.
Exactly.
And I have to discipline them to say, wait a minute, let's look at where the company's going, not where it is or where it's been. And let's look at the competencies you need. Then we look at what's available, and then look at the gaps, and then look at the core. So the first part are the competencies needed. And then the second part are the values and the characteristics that are important. And then some principles that include the diversity principle, that include having time available principle, some other things like that that become important. And then we have a set of criteria. And that process, in my
Right.
experience of working around coming up with that, becomes almost as important as the end product, because it
Definitely.
engages everybody who are the key stakeholders in really thinking about where the company's going and what are the talents it needs to get there.
Yeah, Susan, I
Peggy
think that's a
Carrera,
great point. And I think the other panelists added some great insights. I looked again at where in the trends of where the PricewaterhouseCoopers director survey and what they looked at in terms of directors being hired over the last year or so. So I pull a couple of stats here that, and again, it speaks to the point that boards are looking beyond just specific functional expertise and looking for people with broader expertise in a variety of areas. So industry expertise is down 27% in terms of people that have specific expertise at that particular company in that sector. IT and digital is down 14%. International expertise, interestingly enough, is down 23%.
Wow.
Marketing is down 18%. Now, I think there's still bedrock skills such as financial, operational expertise, risk management, and I would also add having M&A experience are also evergreen expertises. But I think this presents an opportunity for the board aspirants to look at your expertise and to say that, hey, I don't need to be a specific functional expert as these matrix are being built in order to access a board. I'm a very unconventional director because I've been an investment banker. I've done kind of issue side. I've done a lot of other different things. So that provides me a great insight. I've done international, I've done supply chain.
right.
So that puts me in a lot of different places for board service.
A given is financial expertise that is assumed these days as well. And one of Kathleen's most appropriate wishes is that more human resource people would be considered, because the most important thing we do at a board is select the right leadership and make sure they're in place. So Peggy Carreras, just to continue this part, says, it seems to still be about who you know rather than what you know. What suggestions do you have to build up a solid network to open access to board seats? And she's right, it's 80% of positions are still word of mouth accessing board seats.
Well, it's interesting. One thing that I do is I only have capacity for X amount of opportunities. So when I get those opportunities, I try to find out, okay, what are you really looking for? And may I make some suggestions? So if it's going to be 80% informal, then I'm going to do everything I can to help support that informal system with the people that I know, they can no longer say, we can't find them. Please never, never, never as a leader say, we can't find them. You as a leader know what you must do. So I take advantage of that opportunity. I actually have a little list of bios, board bios of people that I have personally come to know and respect that they would be great on boards. As someone already mentioned, there are so many organizations that are specializing in this, so there just aren't any more excuses to me in this category.
There are so many wonderful questions here. Does anybody else have anything to add to that before I go on? So Janice Millam says, can you comment? She's with Marriott and newly back to Phoenix. Welcome back. Can you comment on board opportunities for women that are not in the C-suite, but hold senior level roles in their companies? What should we be thinking about?
Well, I'd like to say that I think one of the paradigms that we need to move away from is that the best people to be on boards are other CEOs. And that's an old paradigm. I lived in Atlanta for more than 20 years and watched the interlocking directorates there. And I think that's a thing of the past. I think we have to let go of that. And that's where I think the experience the functional experience as well as the breadth of experience, especially when we talk about closely held businesses that aren't huge public companies. I mean, I had one client that was, 13,000 employees that was still privately held. And so you don't have to be a public company to be a sizable company. Is another myth that we have to let go of. The other thing I want to just say while we're on the subject is there's so much more opportunity in closely held businesses to make a difference because they are more agile typically and can move fast and react to what the board brings to it. And so I think it's an exciting opportunity. So if you come and you have a professional discipline, I think the discipline of being a professional in an organization is something that's very valuable to family businesses that may be entrepreneurial and moving to a more professional kind of operation. So I don't think you have to be in the C-suite.
How do you access private company boards? Because we know kind of there's a traditional path and some networking for the public company boards or the pre-IPO company boards. But there's so many. And as you mentioned, Leslie, there's a huge opportunity now in advisory boards also and private company boards. But it's how do you find out how to be on those boards and where do you go?
I think a couple of strategies include, number one, professional associations or trade associations. I think a lot of the family businesses go to their trade association meetings in order to learn and in order to grow. And so many times they're going to find access to people at those kind of places. So if you know, like, for example, that there's an industry that you're interested in, being able to go to those meetings.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's one concept. Or chambers of commerce.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would
Anybody
also say we'd be remiss if we didn't point some of the participants and attendees toward the National Association of Corporate Directors. They have both the national event that usually happens around September, October in Washington, D.C., but they also have great local regional events that are comprised of both public company boards as well as private company boards, et cetera, and engaging and meeting with those different governance and nominating chairs. Usually you're at a captive place, so you might find them at the bar, you might find them at the restaurant, you learn a little more about them, what they're looking for. That's an informal way of networking and also learning about board service as well. Plus, they also have a board database in which you can upload your resume into that board database. And I know increasingly a lot of companies that are trying to avoid big fees from major firms are using that database to source directorships as well as even LinkedIn to some degree. So I think there are a lot of different sources that can be found for individuals that are not in the C-suite to access different boards.
Right. And we have a very active NACD chapter here. It's National Association of Corporate Directors, and we have a very active chapter in Phoenix.
This has been a really great discussion. I'm so sorry to say that we just have about 5 more minutes.
Right. Thank you. So I'm just looking at our clock and I wanted to just bring Ken back in and then I'm going to ask each of you to close with 1 minute. But Ken, we had a wonderful conversation and you talked about I asked you, how do you sustain the culture of diversity? And you had a wonderful answer to that. Could you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, as we discussed a little bit earlier, it's really something, again, we believe strongly in diversity and the fact that, as we've said, it's the right thing to do. Who can argue that? And that there's no question that it makes you a better company in all regards. So we've, again, really made that, of course, it's very in fashion now with recent events, and hopefully it will stick. But we've been really on this journey for quite some time for the reasons that in our mind are so obvious. The fact that there is a war for talent and you've got to make sure that you are not considering every part of the population of where that talent is. So that just makes good business sense for us. So that's really sort of the basis of how we view diversity and why we do it. And again, it makes us a better company. And again, I can't emphasize enough that once you get rooted there, it really does start to take care of itself. because again, like-minded people, like-looking people, same interests, of course, will be attracted to the company as well. So it's really just, it's very, very fundamental in our mind, and we think it's a huge advantage because we don't exclude any part of the population for where that talent would be. And there's, the talent is everywhere in all these different groups. So it's just really a very much a fundamental belief in that. And our teams really have embraced it. Jen Basson, who does a huge, great job for us in this area. We have multiple affinity groups that we participate in that really bring a lot of value to the teammates to really, forge ahead. We have more work to do in areas like color and race, and we look at all the statistics. So I'd say, make sure the company's got its metrics. You got to really, be true to those metrics and make sure there isn't any income disparity amongst any of the diverse groups in there. Make sure there isn't diversity as far as leadership positions in that regard. So it's a lot of this,
Thank
the
you.
fundamentals. So it's really just something that we believe in strongly.
Maybe if I might, we might count that as your 1 minute close. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, I just again appreciate everybody's interest and certainly being part of such a great panel here.
Oh, you're just a wonderful example for us all. Thank you. So we'll go to our 1 minute close. Leslie, would you like to go next?
I was thinking about the question that I think most people think about how do we find people? And I think Betsy's comment about being engaged in different organizations is a wonderful illustration of I'm serving on a board of a new bank that's being started here in Scottsdale. And part of the reason I got involved with that board is because of serving on a board in the community. And I think all of these board experiences and community organization examples give us the opportunity to connect with other people and to demonstrate our value in a way that might not be apparent in our normal networks.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Betsy?
Well, I would like to reflect that this conversation today it shows how a good board works, because we're diverse, we bring different experiences, we come to it different ways. And I have learned so much. And what I left out is we're also responding to our customers, who are those of you who are participating. And it's just a significant experience. I hope if you're energized by this, that you take advantage of every contact you can to focus yourself and move yourself forward with courage and with knowing that we need you. Now is the time that you're the ones. And we're so looking forward to passing on what we've experienced and learned over these years.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Adrian.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to perhaps close out with is that one of the biggest tools that we have as a director is our voice, and where we specialize our voice. We talked about the matrix and where we bring certain attributes. I chose to focus on compensation, because compensation is tied to what we measure. And if we are measuring what's strategically important in the company, we should be able to be successful and deliver results to our share owners. So it's really about using your voice and your specialty, because you can make a difference. Find that spot, go in deep so that you can bring the value that your share owners are counting on.
Thank you so much. And Veda.
Yeah, well, lastly, thank you, Susan. I'll be brief. I would say that companies don't practice enough anticipatory management. And I think we saw that throughout this whole pandemic, that in your jobs, even right now, regardless of board service, if you can be a problem solver, if you can be the person that engages in anticipatory management, that is a great skill that's transferable not only in your pursuit within your own companies and endeavors, but also toward a board itself. And I'll also say my first board experience didn't come as a result of a success. It came actually as a result of a failed business deal. So Manny Jackson, who owned the Harlem Globetrotters, who was at Honeywell, who Adrian probably knows and knows my reputation, came to Nike, came to Converse to see if we could do a sports marketing deal. I did not have a prior relationship with Manny. We put the deal, we talked about the deal, we analyzed the deal, we brought people together, analyzed the metrics. It didn't work for them, it didn't work for us. But he went away unbeknownst to me, and he was retiring from a board and said, hey, I met this person at Nike. He had great skills and put great people together. I'd like for him to succeed on the board. So
Thank
I guess I leave you to say, you never know who's watching, and you never know how your performance, even in a failed endeavor, can impact
Absolutely.
your prospects for the future. So, with that, it's been great being with you.
That's a very good point. I would like to thank our spectacular panel for an insightful and impactful and important conversation. And I'm really optimistic that we're on the path to equity in the boardroom, to the time, as Ken says, when we won't need to have this conversation. And I would just urge you all to ask for a board seat and make it a goal, and you can achieve it. It's very achievable. There are lots of fabulous questions, and I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to them all. We will answer them offline, and I only wish, as I said before, I wish we could be in person. Thank you all so much. It's been a privilege. Kathleen?
Thank you. Well, it has been a fabulous panel discussion. So thank you, Veda, Leslie, Ken, Adrian, Betsy, and of course you, Susan. The stories have been great, and really, I'm sure, inspired people to help navigate that panel or that board to their board seat. We appreciate you sticking around to be continuing in the conversation in our breakout rooms. So with that, I'm feeling like a mother who is putting their child on the school bus for the first time. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that feeling, but you received a second Zoom link. And so after you run to the restroom and grab another cup of coffee, you need to click on that link. And we have about 45 minutes or so to interact with a corporate director who will again continue to share their experience and answer your questions about the process of securing a board seat. So our program will conclude at 10:30. We will not return back to the large room. Carrie and I thank you for joining us at this year's event, and really look forward to having you join us at next year's event, and hopefully that one will be in person. But until then, happy holidays, stay safe and healthy, and we have 5 minutes to transition to the breakout room. Thank you, everyone. God bless.